Welcome back to Wave Work Stress Goodbye. Today I'm joined by Suzie Yeulett, also known as the One Point Coach. Susie works in the space of mental well-being from an inside-out understanding, pointing people back to something that's already within them, rather than something that they need to build or fix. She's also the author of The Point of Now, where she explores how clarity and well-being are uncovered, not created. Susie, it's great to have you on.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Great to
Oh,
be here.
no worries, my pleasure. So, Susie, I think a great way to get this kick started is let's assume that someone listening to this podcast doesn't know the inside out understanding or the three principles and has come across your work for the first time. Um, could you give a little bit of how you personally came across this understanding?
So it was by accident, as I think a lot of people probably say. Um, so 7 years ago now, I lost my beautiful mum, and at the time, she'd been poorly for a while, and my dad had been poorly for even longer. So they both had dementia, sadly, and my two boys were under 10 at the time, and I was running two businesses. So the word overwhelmed probably does fit that
Yeah.
situation. But when my mum was actually end of life, which came quicker than I expected, to be honest, I just found that when the care home manager said the words to me, I'd prepare myself if I were you, things really changed for me because then you're faced with this situation where you know there's going to be a loss quite quickly. So when I was with mum, I just fell into this place of just being with her. So I wasn't mentally elsewhere, which up until that point I really had been because juggling two little boys, two different school runs, working on two separate businesses. One was a partnership and one was my own business. And also with my dad being poorly and having a husband and a house and all the other things that go with that, I just could see well, I didn't even see it at the time, but looking back, I could just see the only place to be was where I was right there and then. And it just helped so much because I just was present with my mum, which was so important, obviously, because we didn't know how long we had. And even the carers coming into the room to do the amazing personal care that they do for people said that mum was definitely more noticeably at peace when I was in the room. Now, you could then think, oh, well, what about when I'm not in the room? But I didn't think that. I just thought it just felt calm and peaceful and actually weirdly like she was okay and I was okay, which sounds ridiculous because she was dying. But it just occurred to me it was so natural. And so, having been a bit of a fixer and a problem solver, I just realized that my only job was to just be there where I was. And I could see I couldn't fix it. How could I interfere with the natural process of life and death? So it just felt, it was just different and unexpected. And afterwards, looking back, you kind of think about it a bit more. And friends would say, how are you coping so well? And I didn't really know. I was just grateful that I was. And then I came across the three principles. I think I first read a Michael Neal book. And I did a couple of things with him, and it just explained my experience of that loss situation and the fact that if peace and clarity can turn up in that situation when it's not something you want to be happening. I didn't want it to be happening. I'm not saying it was great, but if peace and clarity can turn up in that situation, if I could be so resilient during that, it must be available all the time. It's not something we go out and actively find. So I just thought, right, I'd like to share this with people because I just see it as being so valuable to help people to just have more ease and lightness and to notice when they have any of that stress, work stress or any stress really. It's actually, we can receive it as an invitation to just settle back down into the point of now, which is what my book's called, as you mentioned. And the point of now is just what's right here, right now in our direct experience. What can we feel? What can we see? What can we hear? Rather than what am I thinking about? And often our thoughts are, well, probably most of the time, our thoughts are as the mind does, as a prediction machine. They're thoughts of the past and what we can do to either avoid or repeat something that we either liked or disliked. And they're thoughts of the future, which is purely predicted imagination. We think we're planning and being responsible, but actually, if we really slow down, we can see that that's pure imagination, which is made of thought. So, my work, the point is an inverted triangle, just a visual to represent this. And the top line represents past and future, the timeline of life, which is where the mind sits. And I'm always pointing people back to the point of now, which is actually the only moment.
Wow, that's extremely powerful already. We've been talking five minutes tops, probably maybe no more than 10 minutes. But yeah, if anyone can get anything out of this recording, it is the point of now. And as you just described, that point of now can be found in the midst of some really extreme circumstances, like you just described with your parents, and any situation for that matter.
Yeah, and actually, it's so interesting. We say, we can find it, but it's already here. It's the
Yeah.
only thing that is actually here. We don't need to find presence. It's already here. We are already present. Our body is always here now. And yet, the only thing that can really take us away from that is the mind and that time traveling.
So when it comes to work stress, Susie, people often associate their stresses coming from a boss or workload or lack of pay or you know a toxic colleague. Um, can I get your take on that in terms of
Yeah.
what's really going on in those situations?
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of looking at it from the inside out. And I guess so often we're looking at the outside, so the boss or the workload or the project or, whatever it might be, or, for me, the noisy builders next
Uh,
door. I can have a lot of thinking about that and the fact that it's inconvenient when I'm recording a podcast, but actually, it's all just what's happening. But to really see that how we are interpreting that, labeling that based on our past experiences, which is the same for everyone, based on our beliefs and our conditioning, we are going to have some kind of filter of what that really means, what that boss and their attitude or the toxic colleague, what that means is they are the problem and they need to change in order for us to feel better. But actually, we're always going to have outside influences. We're always going to have that in life, whatever it is, whether it is a workplace thing or whether it is the loss of a parent or someone you love. Things are always going to happen. So life is always changing. It's always changing, but it's equally always now. And I just think if we feel that stress and really just think, right, what's actually happening now, we can perhaps see a little bit more clearly that it's the feeling in us that is happening now, and it's our reaction to the situation. And given that things will always happen out there, we're always going to be potentially reacting. So actually just seeing that is quite helpful because then we can just help ourselves to settle back and think, right, this is how I am taking this or interpreting this. But actually, what's under that? What's really happening? And it just helps people to hold things a little bit more loosely and to see that perhaps we can't do anything about that outside noise, but we can do something about recognizing it as noise and helping ourselves in the moment. And it's purely just settling back and thinking, or not even thinking, noticing what's happening and then seeing that it's always going to be something. But if we can help ourselves to just hold that more loosely by coming back to now and feeling how we feel in the moment, rather than getting into thoughts of, I might have to leave my job or I need to have a word with someone about the boss's attitude, we can just settle back and think, well, this is the situation. It is what it is. What can I do to help myself? And it is more inside out, but I don't always tend to use that now because how do we put a boundary around the inside and the outside?
Mm.
Because to me, it's all just what's happening now. And I think that can help as well because we can see that it's all just life moving,
Yeah.
and our experience is just our interpretation of that in the moment.
See, I've got you mentioned you've got builders next door and making noise, and one minute you're conscious of it, next minute you're not. I've got children downstairs on half-term holidays, and I'm doing this podcast recording with you right now. And my sister, the kids are always going to be children, and it's true. It's not bothering me right now, even though I can hear them downstairs. But another time would bother me. But like, I'm trying to do a podcast with Susie here, and they're ruining it, and blah blah blah. But it's like you say, outer things are going on, and my experience just changing fluidly, whether I'm
Yeah.
conscious of that or not.
Yeah. And it's really our attention. Is our attention on that thing, and potentially that the kids could suddenly make a really loud noise or run in and distract you? Like that guy on the BBC News, I don't know if you remember in the pandemic when his two kids run in and he's
Yeah,
live,
I do remember that video.
which is
Yeah.
which is brilliant because it's so human, isn't it?
It
But
is,
we're always
absolutely.
slightly guarded and trying to avoid that
Yeah,
happening. But you
yeah,
don't know what's going to happen,
yeah.
especially with little kids, do you? So
And
yeah, I think it's our attention on that, the thinking that goes into worrying about that. If we can loosen that a little bit, kids are going to be kids, as you say. And what can we do? They're our kids, they're our life. It's all part of the unfolding of the moment. And we're grateful that we have these little kids, even though they can be tricky at times.
and let's be honest, that moment on BBC News, that particular video, that would have been happening all around the country in various jobs. It just wasn't recorded to be beamed out to the nation. It's been happening everywhere.
And I
It
think
was.
that's, yeah, because it was such a human, realistic situation, instead of people being critical of it, it became a big meme. And I saw
Yeah.
something about the family online only this week, which is what reminded me of it. And they're quite well known, and the guy has been sharing them growing up and all the support they had from that clip, which I think is great because potentially that clip could have made him feel devastated and hugely embarrassed. But actually, it's been the opposite because of that recognition that that could potentially happen to any of us.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Um, Susie, um, what happens to somebody when they start to notice? You use the word notice. I've noticed when people
Yeah.
start to notice this understanding. So they're in the workplace, things are getting quite stressful and overwhelming, but they start to notice what's really happening behind the scenes. What can that do for someone?
Yeah, so I think the noticing is the first bit. I call it revealing the kind of mental noise and the outside filtering that we do to the inside. And I think it's purely having awareness that that is the mechanism of the mind and that is what we're all doing and we're all innocent. I even work with some guys in prison and I can see the innocence in them because they were brought up and conditioned to have a nice from the age of 10, say. And so if we'd have had that experience, that would have been our experience too. But once people see the mechanism of the mind and thought in particular, the power of thought, we just loosen our grip on it a little bit. So we can be aware that these things are happening, but once we feel that, we can just help ourselves to step back a little bit and recognize that that will always be there, that noise, but we don't have to necessarily attach to it and start thinking, what do I do about this? It's getting into the doing that I think can cause us prolonged stress rather than just the boss or someone making a throwaway comment and us just thinking, okay, well, he's maybe he's in a bad mood, maybe he's had a bad morning, and then we can let that go rather than holding on to it and thinking about it and building it into a big problem that we then need to go and fix. So I think it's that. I love the Sydney Banks quote about if people could just be less afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world, or words to that effect, because then we can just be less afraid of those things happening, hold on to them less, let them go a little bit more, because we can see that that's just the mechanism of the mind and thought. And it just helps us to be to help ourselves in the moment to just let go a little bit, which is really more of a dropping rather than anything to do. We're not carrying it all, carrying all those heavy thoughts and things to do. We're allowing it to just flow and be just the process of life as it's happening. And so I think people can just feel a little bit more clear and a little bit more open. That's the word I love to use. When you are more present, and I'm not saying we have to be present all the time, we are actually physically present, but we don't have to try and be present. But the more we're aware of that stress and tension and the noise that's creating that, the more we can just let it go a little bit by just not hooking onto it so much. And then we can just free ourselves to be more open to the actual moment. So we hear more, we see more, we're more open to any ideas that come out of the blue because we're not so, I call it the habit of mental busyness. We're not so in that habit of mentally got to sort the boss out, got to sort the project out because there's a problem. We're more just, right, what can I do now? What's present now? And it's just so much lighter, but it's not really something we have to do. It's something we have to notice. But my clients just feel, even a client I was working with who was diagnosed with cancer throughout our coaching journey, she just said she felt so much lighter about it, which is significant um, because it is what it is. And that's not meant to be in a harsh way, just put up with it. It just is happening. We can't undo what is happening, but we can hold it a bit more lightly because we don't know what's going to happen next. And so the mind could go to all sorts of things about what anything like that could mean. But actually, if we just allow it to be what it is and just literally sit with it, sit with the feeling of it and notice the feeling rather than pushing it away or seeking something else, we can literally just be open to what's actually happening. And I think we just can see so much more then because the next moment is completely unlimited and free, even though the mind says, well, this could happen. We don't need to worry about that what if because it's pure imagination. And once we see that, we can see that there's not much sense in going down that rabbit hole, I suppose.
No, no. And your example of the client with the cancer diagnosis, that's a massive shift in
Yeah,
understanding, isn't it? Because you get some you know earth-shattering news like that about something so terrible, and the tendency for people is to kind of dwell on it.
yeah,
This person could see
cool.
beyond the experience and start to enjoy life again, which is
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. I mean, she was on my podcast, so it's episode 40 of the podcast, and she came to me because of being overwhelmed by life. And, I work quite a lot with people in the sandwich generation. So you've got dependent kids on one side and aging parents on the other side, and maybe work as well. Um, and the rest of your life going on, pretty much how I was all those years ago. And so she came for that really, but it was through the loosening of her not having to carry everyone else's life all the time. You know, that was just such a big thing for her to see because she had been that caring, doing person, but she couldn't see how much of that was mental, like as in thought generated, carrying the baggage through time and holding it with her the whole time. And so that piece of the revealing that noise helped her when it came to her diagnosis because she could just see that projection wasn't necessarily, of course, how does the mind know what the prognosis is going to be in the long term? It doesn't, but it can guess. And we often guess worst case scenario because that's what the mind does.
Episode 40, you said, was it on your
Yeah,
podcast? I'll
yeah.
I'll make sure that podcast episode's in the notes of this
Thank
recording so
you. Yeah.
people can
Yeah.
see it. I didn't
Was
realize you
just
had.
from
I didn't.
her experience of the whole process, and she knew nothing about the three principles or anything at the beginning. So
I didn't realize you had a podcast actually. I was to mention
yeah.
it on your introduction. Can you tell me a
No,
bit more about that and what you've been doing with that and how
yeah,
long?
so it's called The Spirit of Inquiry, and it's really about, looking at life and our experience a bit more deeply, slowing down to see what's really happening right here, right now. And again, so everything that I'm just about to record episode 50. And by the way, that was just a process of like you just starting it,
Yeah,
keep going. I don't record every week or every 2 weeks even. I just record when I feel I've got something useful to say or if I have a guest in mind.
yeah,
Um, and it's always pointing to the same thing, which is to move away from the noise of the mind, not even move away, just notice the noise of the mind and see that that's illusionary, really. And always pointing to dropping in to this experience of right here, right now. Because we can only ever do, think, feel, act on anything right now. And another way I love to say it is life is literally this breath. That's what we've got. And that's so much more simple. Even that alone, I think, is quite a weight off.
yeah. It reminds me of that Sid Banks video. I can't remember which particular one it was now, but he something quite he basically like made the point of that this moment is now gone, and then that word gone is gone. That five when I said 5 seconds ago, the word gone,
Yeah.
it's gone, it's dead. There's
Yeah.
nothing there anymore. It's just, and the future doesn't exist. It's just what we've got right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So simple, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I guess now we have um, split attention all over the place. We are so bombarded by information and stimulus. And I think about my teenage kids and how they've grown up with this device in their hands. You know, they were homeschooled in lockdown, which was something I wouldn't necessarily want to repeat. But, you know, they're both online to do their lessons, but then the only means of them keeping in contact with their friends was on a device of some kind because we couldn't go out. And so I can see that their attention spans are shorter because they're used to things Amazon arriving the next
yeah.
day and being able to find something out within an instant at the end of their hand. So to them, thinking, going to school and reading about, all sorts of things that happened years ago, fine, but learning all of that just seems so unnecessary when you've got devices that can tell you, and even with AI, it can tell you even more quickly, and more directly. So yeah, I think our attention is so divided and split, and we're moving our attention so rapidly. I mean, that's really what burnout is. We can only do one thing at a time, but we're holding so many tasks to do, and we're firing our attention in all different directions because of the pressure of that. But if we can see that, notice that happening by the feeling it's giving us, we can just see, right, I can only do one thing at a time. And that just takes the pressure off because it's just not viable to do loads and loads of things at once. It might be that eventually we can get to those things, but holding it all mentally now and feeling the stress of that isn't going to help us to perform better.
No, it's funny, isn't it? Because when we create emotional stress and emotional pain, we see it as a bad thing, and we don't understand we can let it go. And I think Dick and Bettinger mentioned a couple of things about this, that it's an invitation to let go
Yeah.
when you get those feelings, not necessarily grab onto them tightly, but just to kind of let go and just see where the next moments take you.
Yeah. And also, I mean, maybe letting go suggests there's something to do, but actually understanding the mechanism helps us to see
Mm.
what's going on. But actually, rather than even saying I've got to let go of it, that let go of that, that could sound a bit like, oh God, now I need to worry about that. But actually, maybe it's more just kind of lean into that feeling right here, right now, because a feeling or a thought can't actually hurt us or do anything.
It just feels
But we
horrible.
think, yeah, we think it can. But if we're leaning in and feeling it, I think there's like a 90-second period where we can have that emotional reaction. So if we can actually lean into that and feel it, I mean, I talk about this in my book, but I went to the dentist to have a tooth removed, and this was quite recently. So, I'm not going in anticipating anything because I don't tend to do that too much now. But I might think, I hope this doesn't hurt too much. But actually, once they started, it's quite an invasive process, obviously, having a tooth removed, and it was right at the back. My nervous system did kick in, and I did start, my heart was beating, and I didn't expect that to be quite such a strong reaction. But of course, it's a natural reaction our body has. It thinks we need to fight this problem off to survive. So I just kind of allowed that raised heart rate to be there and thought, I wonder what's going to happen next, not God, what's going to happen next. So it was more of a open curiosity to what might happen next, rather than hooking on to this feeling of, I've got to get out, I've got to stop them, this is too unpleasant. So it's like almost leaning into that feeling. And like, someone who is prone to panic attacks, all they want to do is avoid having the panic attack, but that perpetuates it. So if we can lean in and almost go, okay, do it, do what's going to happen, we can perhaps see that we're not going to die of a panic attack or a tooth extraction, but it can feel unpleasant in the moment. But if we can slightly ride that wave and just look at it rather than trying to solve it, perhaps that's more helpful in a way than just saying let go.
It's like watching a horror movie at the cinema, isn't it? Because you're watching this, you know, this awful thing happening on screen, but if you've got some awareness of the system, what's going on, the film's kind of going to finish. You think, well, if I just stay with it, I'll just see what happens next, and it might change, and inevitably it does. It's a
Yeah.
similar,
And
similar.
it might not be a good change because it's a horror movie, but we kind of we go to watch a horror movie or we go on fairground rides because we like the energy and the adrenaline of that up and down
Yeah,
experience. And yet, when it comes to something like doing a presentation, we feel the same adrenaline, and yet we think that's a bad thing, and we've got a problem with doing presentations. But if we can see, I had a client who has been doing presentations for 20 years, and she said, I still feel nervous weeks in advance, and I just feel terrible about it. And I just said to her, well, are you doing the presentation now? She's like, no. So, what is creating that feeling in you now? And it's purely the thinking and worry about the presentation. So, we're creating that in ourselves on a Sunday night when we're not doing the presentation until the following Tuesday. So, Tuesday doesn't exist. What exists is right here, right now, and how you're feeling. And if you know that that must be the thinking about the presentation creating that feeling, we can go, oh, okay. Like, do we need to do that?
yeah, yeah. I can relate to that. I've been, as I told you off air. I've been doing these podcast recordings since August. Well, how long ago was that? 8 months? And no matter how many times I do it, I still get nervous. But because my understanding is at a certain level, I can
Mm.
kind of get past it
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just do the thing. And we're doing the recording now, aren't we? So,
yeah.
yeah,
But I think that's interesting if we just look at that energy. Like we've labeled that as nerves, but it's
yeah,
just energy.
yeah,
Maybe it's excitement,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
or your,
absolutely.
or curiosity at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And everyone gets those things, but people give different, I guess people give different meanings to it based on their experience of it. Like someone like Michael Neal, for instance, probably gets nervous, but he probably, like you say, he probably sees it as excitement, and this is the
Yeah.
biggest presentation I'm ever gonna do, and other people would see it as a bad thing and start to crumble under that pressure.
Yeah. But often my clients will talk about that, but they always do the presentation. So if you're
Yeah,
always going to do it, seeing that that before bit is all thought, making you feel rubbish now is the key, really. So that's why I talk about it as being noticing and kind of revealing that, because we can just go, "Oh." Like the
yeah,
builders next door are now amazingly quiet. They might start up again. But yesterday and today, I was thinking that's a little bit annoying. I hope it doesn't interfere with our podcast recording. But then I very quickly go, well, it's going to be what it's going to
yeah,
be, and you probably won't even hear it anyway. So I noticed that that was all thinking about it rather than the podcast being recorded yesterday. It wasn't happening then. So I can just let go of it a little bit. And I think having kids is a good example of that. I've got teenagers now, and you could be thinking, what on earth are they going to do with jobs because of AI? Or, how are they going to cope independently when they're still quite dependent teenagers? But I just don't have too much, I don't grip onto that too much now because I know that right here, right now is what's happening and what I
Yeah.
can do anything about or not. I can just look at it.
And that makes total sense when you say like it doesn't seem to make sense to hook onto something that we don't know what's going to happen in 5, 10, 15 years time, like
Yeah.
so many new
And I
jobs.
think people think that that's responsibility
Yeah,
because that's what we've been kind of led to believe. And you're not irresponsible. I don't feel like I'm irresponsible. I feel like I'm just more present. And I do still get across with them. Teenage boys know everything. So, anything I say is ridiculous, of course. Um, but I don't get into that projection. Well, I do, my mind does all the time, but I just don't take it as seriously because I know it's like watching a movie rather than
yeah.
it's not a prediction at all of what's actually going to happen. And just seeing that, I think, is so freeing.
Well, give me 5 to 8 years, I'll tell you about teenage girls knowing
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, yeah. It'd be a different story, but yeah.
Can you take me on the journey of the point of now? How did the book come about, and the process of you writing it, and the post reaction of it? Can you give me some story around your book as well, please?
Yeah, so I would say it just happened really. And I guess I've always thought I would write a book, but I think everyone says that, don't they? But because the framework kind of came about organically when I was running group sessions, I'd just keep drawing this inverted triangle to help explain the difference between being in mind and time and being truly pointing our awareness, our attention back to right here, right now. And so it just became something that I would just share with people. And so the book talks through the model, but it also talks through my story of loss and kind of the revelations throughout that period, looking back. And so the model is the inverted triangle, and it goes through several layers to try and help people point to this direction. So the top of the triangle, I'll start with O, that's the operating system where we all tend to operate very much in the mind. And then the point is the point of now, right here, right now. And so actually the layers are, I talk about them in the direction they tend to occur, but the first one is P above and around the triangle, which I call perspective. So that's about zooming out and seeing the bigger picture and taking things less seriously. Because if we have a fear of going on an aeroplane, for example, if we zoom out our perspective, we can perhaps see there's just 100 people sitting in rows on chairs. Now, that might be in a plane in the sky, but what's actually happening is I'm sitting in a chair and not thinking or not allowing our thinking of, well, there could be an accident to make us feel worse in the moment. So that's sort of getting perspective, zooming out away from the personal mind and us being at danger. Because unless we're in danger, we're not at danger. So that's perspective. O is the operating system, how the mind works. I is our inner or innate abilities, which are the things like the clarity and resilience and wisdom becoming more accessible when we're just more present. And then N is now, and then T is the turning point. And that's quite important because when we're truly in the point of now, and when we really know that the next moment is completely unknown and unpredictable, we can actually just, I see the turning point as like a 360-degree compass. And so the next moment could go anywhere potentially. It's totally open. So we can actually just expand a little bit and then jump back up to perspective. And it's kind of like a map just pointing towards now, but it's really just going through the process really. And it's not saying we should be at the point of now or always saying we need to be always conscious of being present. It's more that we can notice when we're being stretched on the timeline, in pressure, in stress, in worry, which might feel like responsibility. And when we feel that, we can just drop back to the point of now. So we can be anywhere on that model. And it's all made up. It doesn't mean anything, but it's just a way of illustrating the general direction of our awareness and our attention dropping into what's right here, right now, into the felt sense of it rather than the thoughts about it.
Wow,
So,
it's a really great way of using the word point and the abbreviation to it. Really like
well,
that.
it just all happened that way, and it's quite neat, I suppose. But it just helped me to tell a story of my kind of revelations through losing my parents and the juggle that was going
Yeah.
on, and the things that just evolved and appeared from that. And then I've had a number of client stories in there, and also some of my guest podcast episodes I refer to in there. So it's kind of pulling together the past of 10 years of my experience and the journey to coaching and working with people. So, and then, yes, kindly, Dr. Amy Johnson, my mentor, wrote the foreword to the book, which was a great tick from my perspective. I was very grateful for that. And then I released it on the 11th of November last year.
Wow.
And yeah, so I'm delighted I've done it. I would say the process was easier than I would have thought, although, of course, it takes a bit of time and attention. But the more that I got out of the way, the
Yeah.
easier it became, really. And I'd say there was definitely a tipping point about 50% of the way through where it felt like the book kind of took over a little bit rather than it being me making it happen or forcing it. Um, yeah, so
Well,
I'd recommend it.
credit to you for doing it because I was listening to a Mel Robbins podcast a few weeks ago and she was talking about her friend who had a book deal on the table for 20 years. 20 years she had a book deal on the table and never took it up. That's quite sad, really. And you can only think surely what's getting in the way is just a lot of insecure thinking about it.
Yeah, and what's the worst that can happen? Like doing a podcast, you can try it and do it and adapt a bit as you go along. But I mean, for me, I guess the whole thing, the podcast, the work, and the book is all about sharing something that I just believe is pointing us more to how we naturally operate and just revealing that to people. And it's so helpful if it can help guys in prison and it can help someone who's going through a very difficult situation at work. I've got a client who had, six managers, he's trying to run a project with six different managers, which is obviously going to be quite stressful. But if it can help the whole spectrum from someone in prison to someone in a boardroom, then it's got to be more universal than just it only helps certain people. So the main thing is I just wrote it because I feel that anyone who reads it might get something out of it.
I was going to ask you about clients actually, but I think you might have given examples. But I'll ask the question anyway in case there's something that sticks out in your mind about it. But is there any, you don't have to name names, of course, but is there any clients you've had where the change has been so profound after you've spoken to them, like you can't quite believe it? You got any examples like that to share?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's profound, but it's also simple and subtle. So it's just seeing differently, really, seeing your experience differently. And so I would say all my clients, it's quite a profound change, but they're actually settling back into their own true expression or their own their own understanding how they really operate so that they can just work with that a bit more openly. And it just has tremendous impact on work and life. And it just amazes me. I mean, most of my clients are senior managers or business owners, and they are obviously incredibly intelligent, productive, successful people. But I just think that this isn't spoken about enough. I think we can label things as being a mental health problem, whereas actually perhaps it's an attention problem. And the more people who can see this, really see this and feel it in the moment, it's so helpful, but it's so simple as well.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with that. It's something that's not spoken about in workplaces and businesses enough, and that's why I do what I do. And my podcast is called Wave Work Stress Goodbye because I want people, from employees to managers to directors to CEOs to understand this because with this understanding we can work together a lot better.
Yeah, so it has a ripple effect. And again, it starts with us, it comes back to us. And if we are that CEO or we're a team leader and we are constantly stressed and in our head and concerned about how we're performing, we're not open to the moment. We're not perhaps as receptive to the team as we could be. So the more people who are in that position can truly see this, the more that ripples out to other people invisibly almost. But there's just a, calming or slowing down, which actually helps us to speed up or to progress more, which is not what the traditional perspective is on sort of leadership training and that kind of thing, because that's a lot more about what more can we do? How do we force this person into this mold? Maybe that's a bit harsh, but I'm using contrary language on purpose, really. But if we can help people to see the mechanism behind how we all operate, and to see that we are all connected anyway. We're always going to be, if we're working in an office in particular, or when we have our own business, we're all going to be with other people in some way. So actually, being able to be that sort of more steady but open. Steady doesn't mean it's all just balanced means boring. When we're truly, it's like riding a bike. When you ride a bike, you don't balance once and then that's it. You have to balance continuously to avoid the many potholes on the roads and, any child running out. We have to be aware of what's happening and feel that balance the entire time. But it's a flowing balance. It's not a I must try harder and balance. So, yeah, I think it's just feeling the stress, whether we're a manager or anyone really, and just taking a little beat to feel that feeling, let that 90-second wave of emotion come through. And then we can help ourselves, but we can help the team. And then we're more focused on what's actually important. What is like the guy I worked with who had 6 managers on this project? My kind of coaching with him was around trying to have a single reminder of what's the purpose of this project, what's the heart of it. And then perhaps people can let go a little bit of their own, but I need this slice of the pie because my task is more important.
Yeah.
Well, if the whole project is based on this one significant thing that we're trying to achieve, perhaps we can work together more fluidly and let go a bit of our own personal bits because we're focused on that one point, that one end result or the mission.
Yeah, I used to be a project manager, and I often reflect back and look at all the scenarios I was in when I was before I knew of this understanding or knew of it, but didn't look at it as deep as I do now. And I always think, God, if only we just understood more about what was going on, we could have done that so much better.
Exactly. And that's why
Yeah,
we're doing this, isn't it?
yeah,
That's why
yeah,
we have a podcast and
yeah.
yeah.
Brilliant, Susan. I don't want to take too much of your time, so just a couple more things. So this goes live and someone's listening to this recording. What are you really hoping someone gets out of this? Listen to our chat.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about stress in the workplace or, in your business, I would just encourage people to just feel the pressure as maybe an indication that they're in their mind. Just look at that. Are you in your mind worrying about preventing something or making something happen, which of course we're all trying to do in business? But if we take that a little bit more lightly, take the thoughts and predictions, which is what the mind will do anyway, so we can't stop it, take it a bit more lightly and really look at that and see that perhaps that pressure could be a redirection to slowing down to what's really here right now and looking at that.
Wonderful, perfect. And do you want to take the opportunity to let people know your plans for the rest of 2026? You got anything else in the pipeline, or are you just coaching, or just doing your podcast? Do you want to tell us a bit of
Uh,
what you got planned for the rest of the year?
yeah, so yes, the podcast will continue. Not necessarily on a schedule, but it will continue just as and when it's alive for me to do something. So if people want to listen to that, it's called The Spirit of Inquiry, and the book is called The Point of Now, and that's on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. And yes, I have a small group who I coach, but also I take on one-to-one clients primarily. So if anybody's interested in having a chat, they can get in touch with me. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, have a website, and I'm a teacher on the Insight Timer app, which is a meditation app, so people can listen to a couple of my tracks there. Um, but yeah, it's just all available if people would like to listen, or yeah, I'd be happy if people wanted to get in touch. And thank you so much for having me. It's been great to chat to you.
Absolute pleasure, absolute pleasure. I know it's always been a good recording with someone. I know for the rest of the day, and hopefully as long as possible, I'll be still thinking about conversation because I have a really good feeling right now. And everything that you told me about the app and the book, I'll put all the links in the episode below so people can get them that way as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, but great to meet you. Let's stay in touch.
Great to meet you too. Thanks, Susie.